also on the Zoom call, our Director of Cultural Services, and again, another thoughtful leader who's really taking in this process and figuring out how best this community can lead us through these conversations. So thank you for joining us as well, Dr. Sanchez. And next up, we'll hear from Mayor Keller, who I just want to appreciate for giving us the time and space to have all of these discussions. It can be very rare to have a mayor or a leader who allows for difficult dialogue. And we just really appreciate your leadership in this time and love to hear your thoughts on this, Mayor.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia, and everyone who's joining this call. And, you know, for me, I think it's really about trying to remember all that comes with our city and all that we are unified together in. And part of that is also acknowledging the amazing leaders we have, those on this call, those who are involved in all sorts of ways on this issue and will be in the future, but especially our Congresswoman Deb Haaland and city councilors, you know, Klarissa and Cynthia. You know, you are all three such powerful leaders. And I'm grateful we have elected leaders that can also personally speak to Native American and Hispanic perspectives, as well as represent all of us collectively. And I think that's what's so important, is that we do know for ups and downs, thicks and thins, tensions, and celebrations, we do all live in this community together, and we have for centuries. And that's something that is reflected in our leadership, and it's something I'm very, very grateful for. Now, I want to mention just a little bit about public art before I touch on some of the deeper issues around race, equity, and healing. And excuse me, Monday morning allergies, etc. It's not Corona, but I do want to mention that, you know, in our city, public art has been controversial for a long time, actually. And we have created a process and an ownership situation where public art is guided really by the community through an inclusive and public process. And I think it's actually a good thing that no one politician can unilaterally decide what happens to our public art permanently, right? And that's a good thing. That's because the community should decide it is actually public art. And there are things like City Council and our Public Arts Board that matter both legally, but also for the community. I think in many ways, it's the easy way to just have one politician make all these decisions. And, you know, frankly, that's kind of always my instinct, and what I've been always reminded by both our public arts folks and our counselors, this isn't about one person's opinion. That's the whole point, right? It's about all of our collective histories. And so in Albuquerque, we actually have the opportunity to address these concerns around our cultural identity and find unity in some solutions that actually work for all of us. And that's what this dialogue should really be all about. Now, I think it was about 3 years ago, it's hard even to remember now, when I asked for the voters to hand me this role. And I think back on that, and, you know, a key part, I think at the time I was in our, you know, top 3 priorities for the city. One was equity. And I want to talk a little bit about that because it could never be more important. And it was also about championing our city for what it is, for the shared cultures. This is what we said time and time again with the concept of One Albuquerque. It's that we champion our diversity, but we also know we're all in this together. That has been actually a clarion call for us over the last 3 years and even before that. But also, it's so important as we think about the journey going forward. Because for us, you know, we know from our history that things like racial healing and racial equity is a journey, right? There's no stopping point. There's no one act that makes everyone feel comfortable. It's about taking steps forward. And look, there are going to be steps backwards. But obviously, over time, we have to, you know, bend that arc towards justice and towards reflecting all of our collective identities. And that's what this is really about. Now, as part of this, we've got to remember some, I think, standards around, we've got to stand against oppression in general, no matter when it happened, but also stand with those who are oppressed. And I think most importantly, those who are oppressed now. And that is not to speak in any way for the Black Lives effort, but one of the things that I have learned is they are talking about literally today, each and every day. And so that's something for us to remember in this discussion as well. And it's also, of course, it's unfortunate we have to say this, but I think it's important that our leaders continue to do this. We must condemn all forms of racism and hate of all kinds. That is what universally we cannot have. And that means white supremacy. It means anti-Blackness, which is different than general anti-racism. It also means anti-Hispanic rhetoric and actions, which we have seen a sharp increase in generic anti-Hispanic rhetoric in our city. And this also means anti-Native American rhetoric, which, of course, we've had in our city as well. These actions have no place in Albuquerque and in New Mexico. And we also need to remember that violence is never acceptable. The shooter at the sculpture the other night caused grave harm, and not only just to the victim, but also to the countless people who are afraid for their lives, and to our city, to how it is dividing and creating hate in our city. And those who are doing that, creating that hate and division and violence, must also be held accountable. Now, as we think about reconciliation and the path forward, this process isn't just about whether or not to take down a statue or to rename a street. It's got to be about finding ways that we can heal historical scars with a real reconciliation process. And my hope is that this somehow is our gift also to future generations, because we know this is going to happen like every 10 years. The question is, are we prepared to cope and to heal and to make the changes that we feel are appropriate? That's what we've got to set up for the next generation. And I think as good or as however you feel about it, but past efforts, they didn't set up something lasting that we could use right now. And I hope that is something that we can do for the next generation. So I want to really wrap things up, because this is, even for me, especially just about listening. But as mayor, I think you just sometimes also have to share a few thoughts. And so I appreciate everyone on this call creating that space for the mayor of our city. And so let me close just with, I was born and raised here. Obviously, I do not have a history that goes back centuries and generations, but I was born and raised here, and I know that I love this city. And our collective heritage, that is why we love this city. That's why I came back. That's why they call it the land of entrapment, because we all love it here for one reason or another, and we can't even get ourselves to leave. And I think it's really important to remember that we have long found resilient ways to live together, and it's not always been peaceful, but we have found ways to coexist together and to do things like love each other and intermarry and celebrate each other's culture. And for us, I believe that is part of the path forward. So with that, I just want to encourage everyone to participate and to let others know that you're talking to participate in the process. And the team will kind of outline some emails and contact info to do that. And thank you for the time today.
Alicia, can I say
Yes,
something? I didn't
absolutely.
realize that I was reading my statement. I thought we were just introducing each other at the beginning. So I would like to follow the mayor and what he just said. I was born and raised in northern New Mexico in Espanola, and believing I was Spanish. And, this is America, so I guess we can define ourselves how our parents defined us. And so we were born and raised with those cultures. But we were also born and raised with our brothers and sisters of native pueblos that surrounded our community. And there were people that came to our town passing through that were, German and Anglo and Black and all sorts of different nationalities. And the violence that we've seen toward the Hispanic culture lately has been very, very disturbing to me. It brings back the whole issue of, brutality and disrespect, and, things that is a hatred that many of our communities have felt, not just locally, but nationally. The Black community, the Hispanic community, the Native American community, we've all felt that racism. And probably even you think about breaking into other races, the white community and for example, the Irish and the Catholics. And and this has no place in our state or our city of Albuquerque. And I think that, I'm really thankful that you guys called this morning, because I was personally offended, to the point where, I had to go to the mountains for a day just to get my spirit back, because I felt like somebody had kicked me in the stomach. It's like, no, you don't belong here. And, we have a process, as the mayor described, for taking down public art if somebody's offended by it. Public art is meant to be controversial, and there's nothing that says that we have to keep the same art up forever. And I think that having that community conversation and that community dialogue, we have to remember that the Jornada that was in Old Town was an approved public art process, and it was also approved by the voters. So, we can, as I think Councilor Peña said earlier, we can take down all the statues we want, but it's not going to take away the history that we have together. And, what we pride ourselves in New Mexico on is our tourism. And people come here because they love that diversity and the way that we live together and the way that we work together. And, people are moving here because they want that, because maybe they're not getting that in their own cities. And for us to just stand up and start destroying it, then we become like every other city in the country. And I don't think that's where we want to go. So I think we need to start appreciating each other, building tolerance, which we've had. I mean, I remember going to feast days all my life. They invited our families to the feast days, the different pueblos. That was something, and my parents, they had an art and jewelry store for 30 years. We traded with all of the Native American tribes in the state. So, tolerance, unity, and cooperation, that's what we've done for the last 500 years. And, yeah, there were atrocities, but we also have to remember that, those were times of war. And, we couldn't control those now 500 years later. We can definitely work to make it better, but we can't go back 500 years. And, I'm so glad that we have our Congresswoman on today to, because she has been great in terms of trying to heal our communities. And I'm really hopeful that we bring together our community and calling for this healing process.
Thank you, Councilor. Of those in the community who will be leading to help guide those discussions along. So I just want folks to know that we are committed to it, and we will do our best to help this dialogue be fruitful and hopefully bring some healing and unity. And speaking of healing and unity, it's just amazing to have Congresswoman Deb Haaland on with us. We are so fortunate to have you representing us in Washington, D.C., Congresswoman, and you just really don't need any introduction, so I'm going to let you go ahead and kick things off.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and Mayor Keller, Councilors Borrego and Peña. I'm so happy to see all of you, Hakeem, Adon, Antonio, my dear longtime friends. As a 35th generation New Mexican, I just want to say that I cherish every single one of you, and I'm happy that you're here in our state to make sure that we're moving it forward and growing it. as a Pueblo woman, that's one of our hallmarks is working to make sure that people feel welcome. We open our feast days, we open our homes up to strangers during feast day because we want people to come in and bless our homes with their presence. And I carry that with me everywhere I go, even all the way to Washington, D.C. And in fact, over Christmas, we had a party in my office and I fixed pozole and I baked bread and we invited everybody in. And it was a beautiful thing to know that our New Mexican traditions, we can take them with us anywhere we go. And that's our gift to the world, right? We were all raised the same way. All of us, we're New Mexicans. And so I first want to just say, all of you are, I'm happy that you're here. I cherish your friendships. You know I do, because I've helped all of you in one way or another. And I will continue to do that long into the future. So thank you all. So thank you for having me here today to talk about cultural healing as we move forward from recent events that have caused bad feelings among us and have imparted violence on one of our community members. The shooting that occurred a week ago left me horrified and hurting. I will first say that I pray each day for the victim and his full recovery. We are all New Mexicans. And now in 2020, we all have contributed to the beauty of our state through hard work and respect for one another. The discussion today is nothing new. We have been having these discussions for decades, and what I hope comes out of this conversation is acknowledgement of our past, a path to healing from those actions that seep into the present day, and unity to help move us forward. Yes, Don Juan de Oñate was a brutal man and perpetuated many hateful and horrific acts against the Pueblo Indians, and he influenced others to do likewise. Yes, the Franciscan priests Catholicized us and used my ancestors as slaves to build great places of worship when we instead needed to sustain ourselves and our communities. As New Mexicans, this history belongs to all of us. But we don't have to stay in the past. We can acknowledge this terrible history and work together to heal and move forward because there is too much work to be done. Through the years, both Hispanic and Native Americans have faced deep oppression in our state, but we haven't allowed those terrible injustices to derail our drive to move our state forward. At the end of the day, there are still New Mexicans who are being denied food stamps, health care, and a fair hearing on many issues. These are the issues that will keep all of our children from attaining success, and I want us to focus on solving these issues together. I know we are in tumultuous times. America is finally realizing that we must do right by our communities of color. The massive protests across the country in support of Black Lives Matter have inclined cities and jurisdictions to change rules and laws to reflect more humane policing practices. I'm inspired by these changes as I work in Congress to pass legislation that codifies how our country should treat its people with respect. The things that exclude many communities of color from experiencing the true promise of this country must be addressed and strong, effective action taken. I understand that our history can be sad and painful, but we are all New Mexicans and we have learned to accept each other into each other's families. We work together and converse in each other's languages. When I sit down with the Spanish land grant communities in my district, I feel as if I'm sitting with my aunties, uncles, and cousins because of our shared history and deep spiritual connection to the land. We share so many traditions that make our state unique, and out of that, we can work together for a better future together. On Pueblo feast days and every day, our tables are flush with traditional Pueblo oven bread, which we have because the Spanish brought both wheat and hornos. Many of our family members raised cattle and sheep, which are also part of the cultural exchange that our ancestors participated in centuries ago. Squash and corn, Pueblo farm staples, are cooked into calabacitas that seemingly every Hispanic household calls their own. All of our favorite New Mexican restaurants cook the food that makes our state so unique, a combination of Spanish and Pueblo Indian. The challenges we face because of the coronavirus are because communities of color have faced disparities that other communities have not. And that's why our communities have the highest percentage of COVID-19 cases per capita. We must stick together to fight the issues that have been long-standing in this country and fight for what is right. I'll leave you with a quote by Martin Luther King Jr. from his Nobel lecture, and which was highlighted in the Spike Lee film, Do the Right Thing. He says, "Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. It is impractical because it is a descending spiral ending in destruction for all. The old law of an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. It is immoral because it seeks to humiliate the opponent rather than to win his understanding. It seeks to annihilate rather than to convert. Violence is immoral because it thrives on hatred rather than love. It destroys community and makes brotherhood impossible. It leaves society in monologue rather than dialogue. Violence ends by destroying itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers." And of course, Martin Luther King Jr. was a very wise man. Before I close, I just want to acknowledge that I did invite our former Secretary of Indian Affairs, Alvin Warren, to be here with us today. I know he's extremely busy, and just want to acknowledge that he is always a strong and calming and respectful voice among us. And then I also want to acknowledge my dear friend, Adán Carriaga. Adán, an artist here in our state, he makes santeros. And he does that because he feels it in his heart. And the spiritual guidance that any of us gain, regardless of where it comes from, that has to, in a way, guide us in what we're doing. Because as humans, you can see we get far too emotional, we fly off the handle too easy, we do things that we regret later on. We're human beings, and that is something that none of us can escape. What we can do is we can rely on each other to be a sounding board. We can rely on each other to advise us, or to say, yeah, that's not such a great idea. How about if you try this? In the end, my true hope is that we all absolutely realize that we are New Mexicans. We are unlike any other state in the entire country. And we have lifted each other up for a very long time. And I want us all to continue to do that, because it's our children and our grandchildren that I want to see benefit from the fruits of these hard discussions, benefit from our hard work that we're doing to make sure that we can come together and move these issues forward. And with that, I will return it to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Congresswoman. That was just incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing your words and your wisdom and your love with us and with the community. This is exactly what we need right now. And we just appreciate you so much. And I want you to know that each and every one of us appreciates all that you're doing and your perspective. Here at the city, we announced recently that we'll be engaging in a public dialogue with community. We're calling it the Race, History, and Healing Project. And the internal team lead for that project is with us today. His name is Hakeem Bellamy, the Deputy Director of Cultural Services. Hakeem, I'd like you to say a few words, but again, just want to reiterate that this process belongs to you all, to the community. We are just here to help that process go along. So Hakeem, if you'd like to share more about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. And thank you for all the city and state leadership that's at the table right now. And thank you, Congressman Haaland. Appreciate you all the time. I want to just, to Alicia's point, say that I feel humbled and honored and challenged to take on the role of team lead for the race history and healing project. I am one of 12 professionals within the dual departments kind of leading this, CSD, the Cultural Services Department. My director's here, and Director Melendez of the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And across both of our departments, we have a staff of 12 that are really devoted to providing support for this project. In fact, we're calling it the CABQ support team, and to really help hold space for this project that's truly led by community members and community advisors that have also agreed that this is the way to go. And so I do want to thank the mayor for really holding the space for the community to have a conversation that that should not just be adjudicated from City Hall or from other spaces, but to really help us really come together and have a frank discussion so that we can move forward in a way that is more healing than not. And that was exactly what the Congresswoman said, that we have to really come up with the 3 phases. She said, acknowledging our past, a process of collective reckoning and healing, and a way forward. This process endeavors to do all of those things. Before I just make the formal invite to everybody listening on this call and the public, which we've made at least 2 or 3 times over the past week, I did want to share just personally that I was able to go to South Africa in 2012. And I just remember sitting on a patio watching people go up and down the street. And South Africa is not perfect. They are one of the other great experiments in our collective history of living together on this planet. But I do know that it felt like where they were as far as race relations was at least parallel to where we were as a country, and we had almost a 270-year head start. And so I truly believe that this is the way to go. And I didn't get to choose it. Mayor gets to choose it, and I'm glad he did. And so I can co-sign that this is just something that we have to do. We can't kick the can down the road in this 3rd wave of the movement for Black lives and hope that it miraculously gets better 2 years from now. We have to act, we have to lead. Our present generation is asking us to do better. I was able to be with Mayor 2 Thursdays ago at a Black Lives March near the university, and was struck by how everybody, like almost everybody in that crowd, was clearly 10 years younger than Mayor and I were the same age. And that's encouraging. And it's also encouraging that crowd was very diverse. And so they're looking at us to not run away from the hard questions and conversations. And so that's what we're asking the community to do. We ask you to join us on the Race and History and Healing Project. You can reach out to us. You reach out to me directly, but the actual receiving email to be part of this conversation is cultureabq@cabq.gov. And thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you, Hakeem. And just thank you all. As a Hispanic woman who grew up here in Albuquerque, and my family goes back hundreds and hundreds of years too, I just can't help but be so grateful for the leadership that we have across the board, not only on the screen right now, but all across our community, to lead us through this very important dialogue and discussion. And so thank you all for stepping up to lead in a tough time. And we appreciate all of your words and your wisdom. And I think it's only appropriate that we end the way we started, which was reflection and prayer. And so, Mr. Trujillo, if you wouldn't mind closing us in a moment of reflection and prayer, we would be ever so grateful.
And thank you so much for asking. And I just want to give a few words. I know Deborah because I used to be her pastor. I was a Franciscan priest, and I was the pastor of Acoma and Laguna. And I was part of the discussion when the state and the Hispanic community were celebrating the 400th anniversary of the entrance of the entrada of, but I was stationed at Acoma, and I heard a whole different narrative there. And I remember the Oñate statue controversy 22 years ago. we were at the city of Albuquerque. And one of the things is that, we could talk about, the past, and it doesn't affect what we do in the present. And we had a lot of statements that were just said today. And yet, one of the things that I came out of the meetings and so forth, and it was right in the middle of the sexual abuse of the Catholic Church. And one of the things that everybody can agree on of how the church handled it terribly was that they never took responsibility of the actions of its priest. And I was one of the colleagues at the time, and it was just, and it was a trauma for the church. And part of that trauma only increased and it made matters worse because the church would not even listen to the victims. When it came to the Yakima situation, especially with Oñate, it was on a historical level that for all these centuries, nothing and ever has anyone listened and taken responsibility that this happened in the lives of a community. And so when Oñate, one of the compromises that I remember was that it was supposed to be the heroes and the strongest people were the women of the community. And so originally what happened and what we were hoping was that it would be women and children meeting at the river and bringing their gifts. And so it was a powerful image. And I think sometimes we just need to start not with those people who had dominance, who had money, who had wealth, but it comes down to in any community, and it's amazing to see women in leadership today, is that we forget about the whole aspect of the heart. And sometimes when we see violence, it's because there's been an atrocity that has not been healed. And it can be in a domestic situation of boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, how, we have to be right and we have to prove our point, but all it does is escalate until something happens where there's violence at times. And police are called and it just gets out of control. And so what happens on a domestic level happens in a community level, and it happens in a state level and a national level. And now, sometimes globally when there's wars. So I just want to say thank you, Deborah, for inviting me to be part of this discussion, because I can see that the work is still needed in what we're doing. And I see and listening to the leadership here. And let us again close our eyes as we can conclude, and let us take a deep breath. The Holy Spirit, and allow the breath of God to heal our hearts, so that as it heals our hearts of our own personal issues, our lives, can help us heal the hearts of our families, help heal the hearts of the community, help heal the hearts of our neighbors, so that in the strength we may find courage to speak, to listen, to grow, but most of all, in reflection, know that you are the center of all, with the guidance that we do. And thank you for those words, the words that are going to be spoken. And let the words heal, transform, and make us anew, so that we may experience the kingdom of God here on earth. And we ask this in all of our faiths. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time today and joining us. We hope this is just the very, very beginning of this important discussion as we move forward. And I hope that you all have a blessed day, and let's continue this great dialogue.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
We'll hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.